Two of Phil Taylor's 4 children sat down with a national newspaper and described their relationship with the most decorated darts player on earth in 4 words: "We are dead to him." Taylor's lawyers tried to stop the story from running, and they could not, and the reason stretched back to a Scottish courtroom in 2001, to a missed double 12 in Gibraltar, and to a podcast recorded only last year, all leading to the side of the power that the sport of darts has spent decades trying to bury. The trail leads back to October of 1999 to a small town called Leslie, tucked into the county of Fife in Scotland. Taylor was 39 at the time, already a multiple world champion, and he had just finished playing an exhibition. After the show ended, he offered 2 23-year-old women a lift home in his chauffeur-driven motorhome, which is where everything went wrong. According to the case later heard at Dunfermline Sheriff Court, Taylor challenged the women to drinking competitions with vodka and Newcastle Brown Ale, and once inside the motorhome, he fondled both their breasts, repeatedly tried to undo their trouser zips, and attempted to pull one woman's shirt off. Both women shoved him away and called a boyfriend to come and collect them. The verdict landed in March of 2001. A Scottish court found Taylor guilty of indecent assault against both women, and on the 27th of that month, he was sentenced and fined £2,000, broken down as £1,000 for each victim. £2,000 for a conviction on 2 counts of indecent assault against a man who at that moment held more darts titles than anyone alive. The timing of the verdict could not have been worse, because Taylor's name was already sitting on the New Year Honours list for 2001, and the recommendation had been an MBE. That nomination was quietly annulled before the ceremony could happen, which means that to this day, despite being the most decorated darts player in history, Phil Taylor holds no MBE, no OBE, and no knighthood. In his own autobiography, Taylor admitted the punishment never fit the crime, comparing it to, quote, being convicted of drunken driving and not being banned. That conviction casts a long shadow over everything else in his career, but it is not the only fracture in his story. The next one runs back to where his career began, with a man named Eric Bristow. Back in 1985, Phil Taylor earned his living making toilet roll holders in a Stoke-on-Trent factory for around £52 a week. Bristow noticed him, lent him £10,000, the equivalent of roughly $50,000 in today's money, and told him to turn professional. 5 years on, in January of 1990, Taylor walked into the BDO World Final as a 125-to-1 outsider, and he beat his own mentor 6 legs to 1. The student had overtaken the master. Taylor himself later wrote in his autobiography that Bristow had, quote, coaxed, bullied, humiliated, and often literally punched him into making it as a pro. A mentorship as violent as it was generous became the foundation for everything that followed. For more than 2 decades after that, Bristow remained Taylor's most public defender. The break came in June of 2013, with an incident now etched into darts folklore as Cheatgate. At the Gibraltar Darts Trophy, Taylor was awarded a leg on what was in fact a missed double 12. The referee, Russ Bray, called it in. His opponent Dean Winstanley failed to notice, and Taylor himself said absolutely nothing. Once the footage hit the internet, Bristow, the man who had funded Taylor's entire career, went public, and his words were direct. Quote, the player knows if it's not in the bed and has to declare it. You don't want cheats in the game. The relationship between Taylor and his mentor never properly recovered. April of 2018 brought a final goodbye when Bristow died of a heart attack at the age of 60, and according to those close to both men, full reconciliation had never actually arrived. After Bristow's death, Taylor's tribute landed like this, quote, Eric was like a brother to me. I loved him. Quite simply, I owe him everything. The Bristow fallout was not an isolated incident because Phil Taylor's career reads like a list of broken handshakes. Going back to 1993, when 16 players broke away from the BDO to form what would eventually become the PDC, Taylor was not just one of the rebels, he personally lent the new organisation £40,000 to fund a legal battle. His own words on that loan are clear, quote, without me, there wouldn't have been a PDC, I paid the barrister's wages, the final £40,000, otherwise we weren't going to court. One of the original 16, Mike Gregory, pulled out at the last moment and went back to the BDO, and Taylor never forgave him. Years later, he commented that Gregory had missed out on history and would never be part of what they built. The BDO itself went bankrupt in 2020. Taylor ended up owning roughly 8.2% of the PDC, a shareholding valued at around £575,000 during his 2016 divorce. Peter Manley earned his place on the list at the 2002 PDC World Final when Taylor beat him 7-0 and Manley refused to shake his hand. Years afterwards, Manley invited Taylor to his own wedding, and Taylor never showed up, never called, never offered any excuse, just delivered silence. Paul Nicholson booked his spot at the 2011 UK Open, where he beat Taylor and theatrically waved him off the stage. Taylor's response on Sky Sports was unflinching. Quote, "Paul Nicholson messed about, wound the crowd up. I think the fella's an idiot for doing that. He's going to go away and learn about it. Last thing you want is get the home crowd on your back." He called Nicholson very silly. Raymond van Barneveld is on the list too. The Dutchman, who, in the 2007 PDC World Final, climbed back from 3-0 and beat Taylor 7-6 in front of more than 1 million Sky Sports viewers. 6 years on, at the 2013 World Championship, Taylor took the semi-final 6-4, and the handshake at the end turned physical. Taylor shoved Van Barneveld, words were exchanged, and afterwards Taylor offered an apology. Quote, "I reacted disgracefully, and I feel terrible." Van Barneveld, looking back, summed it up quietly and devastatingly. Quote, "That's the only time I thought, this is the other side of Phil." The Other Side of Phil came out again in 2017 on Sky Sports when commentator Wayne Mardle, himself a former player who had beaten Taylor at the 2008 World Championship, asked him a question after a match against Kevin Painter. Mardle wanted to know why a player like Painter had managed to put Taylor off his rhythm. Taylor's response, broadcast live, became one of the most uncomfortable moments in darts television history. Quote, "Of all people, you shouldn't ask me a question like that." Mardle tried to laugh it off, and Taylor refused to let it drop. Quote, No, you've asked me a question, I'm going to answer you now." From there, Taylor denied the premise entirely, insisting Painter had never put him off, that he had won 4-1 and 4-0. Michael van Gerwen joined the list as well, the Dutchman who took Taylor's record televised 3-dart average in 2016, and whom Taylor described after a match play defeat as, quote, "sat in there crying his eyes out." Adrian Lewis sits in a category of his own. Like Taylor, he came out of Stoke-on-Trent, and Taylor himself mentored him as a young player. Together, in 2013, the two of them produced what many regard as the greatest televised darts match ever, a Grand Slam semi-final in which they combined for 32 180s and a combined average of around 221. 12 years on, in 2025, Adrian Lewis sat down for a podcast and described what playing Phil Taylor was actually like. According to Lewis, Taylor used psychological warfare at the ockey, including deliberately breaking wind during opponents' throws. Lewis also alleged that opponents' dart cases would mysteriously vanish during tournaments. The exact phrase Lewis used was simply, "he is awful for it." Even the Alexandra Palace crowd ended up on the list. Taylor's final professional match, the 2018 World Final against Rob Cross, finished 7-2, with Cross averaging 107.67. On the way out, footage uploaded that same January caught Taylor flipping a middle finger and swearing at sections of the crowd. The greatest career in darts history closed with the world champion firing the bird at his own fans. The darkest chapter in Phil Taylor's story has nothing to do with other players, nothing to do with cameras, and nothing to do with refereeing decisions at the ockey, because it centers entirely on his family. Taylor met his wife Yvonne in 1977 when he was 17, and she was 15. They married in 1988, and Taylor reportedly played a county darts match on the afternoon of his own wedding before turning up at the reception. 4 children followed, named Lisa, Christopher, Kelly, and Natalie. On the 11th of March 2016, at Nottingham Family Court, the marriage was formally ended. Yvonne walked away with a lump sum of £830,000, £149,000 in pension costs, a holiday home in Tenerife, and 3 other properties on top of that. The divorce, brutal as it was not the worst of it. A year earlier, in 2015, the Sun newspaper had already published a story in which Taylor's 2 youngest daughters, Kelly and Natalie, alleged that their father had financially cut them off. Kelly, according to the article, was living in a hostel in Stoke-on-Trent. Natalie was pregnant with her 4th child and living in a council house. The line both daughters reportedly used was simple and devastating. Quote, "We are dead to him." At the time, Phil Taylor was reportedly earning around £1 million a year, while his daughters were said to be on state benefits. Taylor went to court for a legal injunction to block publication. The injunction failed, and the story ran anyway. That contrast between the man on the Sky Sports stage and the father his daughters described runs through every chapter of Taylor's career. The friend who became Eric Bristow's punching bag and then his usurper, a PDC builder who lent the organisation £40,000 and made sure nobody ever forgot it. A world champion convicted of indecent assault who lost his MBE because of it. A mentor accused a decade after retirement of cheating his own opponents at the ockey, and a father whose own children went to a tabloid newspaper to say they were dead to him. Summer of 2024 brought hip replacement surgery. The scar tissue that followed, Taylor told TalkSport, caused, quote, "the worst pain I've ever had." He summed up his current condition with a line that has since become something of a self-epitaph, quote, "My mind is still in my teens, but my body is 90. On the 20th of May, 2025, Taylor announced his retirement from all darts, including exhibitions, and according to those close to him, he no longer owns a set of darts. The greatest player in the history of the sport has put them down for good. When Luke Littler won the 2026 Masters in February of this year, the new face of darts paid Taylor the ultimate compliment. Quote, "Phil Taylor will always be the best unless I somehow win more than him." The compliment was generous, and on the ockey, it was probably even true. 16 world championships, 214 professional titles, an 84% win rate in major finals, and a record free dart average of 118.66 that stood for years. By every statistical measure that darts uses, Phil Taylor is the greatest player who ever lived. Greatness on the board and greatness off it are two very different scores. When you weigh up the full record, the conviction in Fife, the annulled MBE, the divorce settlement, the daughters in the sun, the Cheatgate fallout with Bristow, the broken handshakes, and the recent allegations from his closest protégé, the reason becomes obvious why. Despite everything he won, the British honour system has never once come knocking. The power, as it turned out, came at a cost, and the man wearing the nickname was not always the one paying it.